The Texas Chainsaw Massacre series is one of the most retconned franchises in history. Going over the series, there was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, 2, then Leatherface, and then the weird reboot Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation with Matthew McConaughey's robot legs. The series sat for a while until 2003 when it was remade under Michael Bay's Platinum Dunes. The movie was a hit, but they painted themselves into a corner, so when in doubt, just do a prequel. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, which just sounds weird, like Attack of the Eye Creatures. That didn't do so well, it only made about half of what the 2003 one did, so back on the shelf. In 2013, they released Texas Chainsaw, or Texas Chainsaw 3D. The late sequel, which they were so confident was going to be a hit, they had the actors sign on for a trilogy. I personally enjoyed this sequel on par with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but I know I'm in the minority. It was a big bust, so they decided to reboot it again with the prequel Leatherface in 2017, which I listed as the worst movie of 2017. That movie was another massive failure, so where do they go from here? Netflix decided to remake the film again as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Did they finally get it right after so many failed attempts? Well, let me answer that by explaining a pivotal scene in the movie. Leatherface walks into a busload of people having a party. He's covered in gore, wearing a woman's face and holding a chainsaw. The people all hold up their cell phones and start recording, while one says,
"Try anything and you're canceled, bro."
So in other words, the new movie is garbage. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, as I discovered, a late sequel and not a straight-up remake, which makes the wording really interesting. The first one is The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then now the sequel is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Get that pesky "the" out of there. It's been 47 years since the events of the original movie, and a group of, I think the guy is supposed to be a rich influencer, buys most of an abandoned town in Texas. They have a group of hipsters on their way to participate in an auction where they're selling off different buildings in the town so they can turn it into some presumably snobby paradise. They find one building, an orphanage, which has an older lady still living there. The chef influencer guy Dante is mad because there wasn't supposed to be anyone here. She tries to prove that she still has the deed to the house, but Dante flips out because he thinks the old lady is racist and calls the cops to have her removed. She starts to have a seizure, and the cops take her to the hospital, along with the last boy still in the orphanage, this gigantic dude. On the way there, the old lady dies, and we discover the guy is, of course, the original Leatherface, who flies off the handle, killing the cops and goes back for revenge. He heads to the orphanage, smashes through a wall to get, what else? A chainsaw. The chainsaw's been in the wall a few decades, but guess what? It still works just fine. I guess gasoline never evaporates. Early on, they mention the events of the first film, and they try to make bits from the first movie look like a documentary. The only survivor, Sally, went through therapy and became a cop or a ranger or something, and has spent the last few decades hunting Leatherface. So now that Leatherface is back, she can have a final showdown and get a revenge for what the Sawyer family did to her friends. So that's 2 times the vengeance converging in this ghost town. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but everyone in the main cast was unlikable. They were a bunch of smug, self-centered idiots. The only one who was kind of okay was Lila, the younger sister who survived a school shooting. The only character I liked was someone who I think they wanted the audience to hate. The older sister, Melody, reminded me of that New Guy comic, where she thought she was the good guy, but really was the asshole. She was insufferable. I had a lot of problems with the film, but the biggest one was Leatherface. While it's never said how old Leatherface is in the original, let's go by Gunnar Hansen's real age. He was 26 when they were filming. So now, in 2021, when I'm assuming this was filmed, that would make Leatherface 74. The dude had an endless supply of energy, was shot a few times point blank with a shotgun, hit with a bus, and slashed with his own chainsaw. Yet he's still coming back for more. I know in the 2013 one was also supposed to be in the future, but it was supposed to be late 90s, early 2000s, which would make Leatherface in his 50s. That 20 years makes a big difference. I have a major spoiler here, but I have to mention it because it really pissed me off. Sally comes back to have her final showdown with Leatherface. She has him dead to rights, and of course, doesn't shoot him. Then after he almost kills some more people, she finally does a, "Hey, remember me now?" and shoots him, which of course does nothing. He then proceeds to impale her on the chainsaw. This annoyed me for two reasons. Number one, you brought back a legacy character just to kill them off. And two, the original actress Marilyn Burns died back in 2014, so they brought in someone else to play the part. It just felt really disrespectful. They could have wrote something like Sally the Survivor lived a happy life, but no, they had to bring her back just to kill her. It was like they tried to do what they did with Laurie Strode in Halloween, but then did the dreaded subverted expectations and killed her off. The movie had a lot of gore. Unfortunately, it was a lot of CG gore. Blatantly obvious bad CG gore. Again, I don't hate CG. I hate lazy CG. And this stuff looked ridiculously fake. Some scenes just looked off too. Like the shot I keep seeing of Leatherface in the field they were using for the marketing. What even is this? The movie was rushed. It was short, only about an hour and 20 minutes. So while it stunk, at least it was quick. However, it gave us no time to get to know the awful characters, which they tried to make them somewhat sympathetic, but it didn't work. Maybe a little more time would have fixed that, but I don't know. It was like they wanted to breeze through the setup so they could get to the killing. The only one thing I really liked was the ending, but not for the reason I think they were going for. I liked it because it was hilarious. I laughed for a good minute at how they tried to do a 2022 homage to the 1974 ending. Lila is hanging out the roof of a self-driving car as Leatherface cuts off her sister's head and then flails around like Gunner did. It's so bad. The decapitation is hysterically fake. The movie is somehow simultaneously anti-gun and pro-gun. Were they trying to be satirical? At times I thought they were, but then other times, I don't know. If so, they failed hard. I will say it was bad, but at least it wasn't boring. That would have been the final nail in the coffin here. It moved at such a pace that I didn't zone out. I didn't really care what was happening to the characters, but it still kept me engaged, which is kind of impressive, really. It had a few references to the series. Some weren't too blatant, like showing the town population was 1974, which was the release year of the original. Others were more on the nose, like Mrs. Max saying, "If I knew you were coming, I would have put on my face." Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is about par for the course with Netflix these days. They take a known property, squeeze in some current year politics, a sprinkle of terrible effects, a lame half-baked story, and crap out a turgid pile of feces. I remember when being picked up by Netflix was a good thing. The characters were awful, and the only person I was rooting for was Richter, who had his head caved in. So then I just rooted for Leatherface. It does seem to be split down the middle. A lot of people loved it, and a lot of people hated it. For me, it stunk. However, it's still better than the 2017 prequel, Leatherface. So, they managed to make another terrible Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but at least they didn't make one worse than the last. If we've reached this point, though, just let the franchise end. If you like the movie, that's fine. But you no longer get to complain about, "Do your thing, cuz," when this exists.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.